You are welcome to Collins Inima Treasury of Excellent Knowledge. Once again, welcome today being Thursday, 22nd of April 2021. I am your humble servant evangelist Collins Inima, greeting you from my base, the city of Valencia in Spain, and most especially greeting you in the name of the only Lord of the universe, Jesus the Christ. I give God thanks for keeping us alive today. I give God thanks for our health today. And I give God thanks for His grace in all ramifications upon all of us. May His name alone be highly glorified in the mighty name of Jesus Christ. And I pray that the Holy Spirit should come and take control of today's teaching, of this particular teaching, direct it to the glory of God according to the will and the purpose of God, and for the enlightenment, proper enlightenment of humanity, to human benefit and to the glory of God, in the mighty name of Jesus Christ. Amen. So as you can see on the topic, I don't know who is present at the moment, but I've seen your name have not appeared at the appropriate time. Your presence will be, your name will be announced. However, your presence is highly recognized and acknowledged by me, your humble servant, Evangelist Collins Inyima. As you can see on the screen, it is about who are the Hebrews. Who are the Hebrews from points of reality. As a member of this platform, I am not to begin afresh to explain to you what points of reality is all about. It is all about fact and figure, about the truth, and from the truth himself, which is God, which is Jesus Christ, and which is the Word of God. From the truth, from the facts. Forget about controversy, forget about fictions, forget about superstitions, and forget about self-ostentation, but about the reality of the whole things. Who are the Hebrews? Who are the Hebrews? And most people may not actually understand the Hebrews, the people I am talking about. Then some people may not understand that the book of Hebrews in the Bible is about a people, that the name Hebrew is a people. And that name Hebrew as a people is also a language. It is also a province or provinces. Wherever they occupy, they are a set of people, and it is their ancestral name. That name has an origin, and that name has a territory, or not only a territory, but territories wherever the Hebrews occupy. And that name is a tribal name. It is a generic name for a set of people. It is not beyond a tribal name. Formerly, it was a tribal name, but developed to a name of a nationality. The Hebrews are a nationality. They are no longer just a tribe, but they are an ethnic group of people occupying various places in this planet Earth, but are being narrowed down to a small entity. By political domination, not by points of reality. But from points of reality, I am here to expatiate about those who are actually the Hebrews, the people, and the stories which is the history surrounding those people, what has happened in their lives, and the ones they do themselves and the ones done to them by others, the Hebrews. And from points of reality, this points of reality is from Bible records. From Bible record, who are the Hebrews? From Bible record, according to God, which is in line with the creation and the global migration of humanity. As people continue to migrate, people begin to bear their names according to their ancestors. So the name Hebrew is their generic ancestral name. Who are they actually? And to which extent can we describe these people? Are they in a particular territory? Some assume that it is some people in the land of Israel that are the Hebrews. Some assume that it is the migration of the Igbos from Israel that are the Hebrews. Some assume that it is an ancient people, or it was an ancient people who do no longer exist at this point in time. Some may not actually understand. While some knows that there are some of them who left Egypt and vacated as a result of immense suffering of the people who left on their own, even before the commencement of the Exodus, which God sent Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. There have been people who left Egypt before them out of frustration, and they are part of the Hebrews. And in which place do they occupy on the planet Earth? We are going to see and hear from this lesson. May God bless you for listening. And the Hebrew can be referred by some people as part of the Israelis, while some may believe that part of the Israelis are Hebrews, while part of the Israelis are not Hebrews. But I am here categorically telling you that all Israelis are Hebrews. And beyond the Israelis, there are Hebrews who are non-Israelis. There are Hebrews who are non-Israelis. And all Israelis are Hebrew. You will be surprised from the content of this lesson to confirm what I am telling you from Bible records and from Bible conveyances. That is Bible revelations, what the Bible reveals from the Bible record, from the passages of the Bible, which you might have been reading or you might have not taken your time to read and research. Then combining it with archaeological research to affirm it with some physical evidences and practical evidences from around the world. All the Israelis are Hebrew, but all Hebrews are not Israelis. Hebrews had begun to exist before the birth of Israel. Then Israel is a descendant. Israel is a descendant of Hebrew. Israel is the consequent generation, one of the consequent generations of the ancestors of the Hebrew. Abraham is a Hebrew, but Abraham is not an Israel. You may be surprised to hear what I'm saying. Abraham is a Hebrew, and Abraham is not an Israelite. Rather, Abraham is the father, is a grandfather of Israel, of the Israelites. The Israelites are the grandson descendants of Abraham. Abraham gave birth to Isaac. Isaac gave birth to Jacob. Jacob's name was changed to Israel. Then the Israel you hear today are all descendants of Jacob. And the name they bear as Israel is the changed name given to their father, which is Jacob. Because Jacob means a supplanter and a deceiver. It has negative meaning, but due to his divine encounter with God, his name was changed from being Jacob, which is a deceiver, to Israel, meaning a prince with God and a struggler with God. That's the two meanings of Israel. So Abraham is a father of the Israelites, not just a direct father, a grandfather of the Israelites, a great grandfather of the Israelites. Then Isaac is a grandfather of the Israelites, while Jacob is the direct father, the nuclear father of the Israelites. Then from Jacob we have 12 tribes of Israel, which are named according to the 12 sons of Jacob, because in those days female we are given birth to. women were born, but ancestral lineage we are always being counted from the male, and not from the female. However, events may warrant that some of the women's name may be mentioned, but they are never given ancestral lineage in anywhere in the history of the Hebrew and in the history of the Israel. So there are differences between the entirety of the Hebrews and the Israel and the Israelis as the Hebrew. So these are some key facts I want us to grab before I will go into the in-depth lesson. Because the lesson will take long, as I've seen it will take long. I have a variety of reading which I will read that will give us detailed information regarding what we must know about who are the Hebrews. And from here, you will realize that the Hebrews have been in existence before the birth of Israel, as I have said. And they continued as the Israelis. All Israelis are Hebrews. Some people may wonder and ask a question like, what about the name, the Jews, given to the Israelis? The Jews is now a dominant name, but not really their ancestral name, and not really their generic name, but it becomes a dominant name as a reason of invasion of the Babylonians in Israel, then warring against them, conquering them, and taking the majority of them into captivity. And there remained a part of the Israelis which was only the tribe of Judah were the remnants as at then. Then while the rest of the remnants, the Judah and the Benjamites who supported them, while the 10 lost tribes of Israel, as we hear today, we are taken into Babylon. Then at that time, Israel had two kingdoms, which was Israel and Judah. The Israel capital was Samaria, while the Judah capital was Jerusalem. Then at this point in time, the capital of Israel and the territory of Israel we are taken to captive, which is Samaria, and we're comprising the 10 tribes. And Judah, part of the Israelites, was not attacked, was not invaded. So the remnants, as at then, continue to bear their name, Judas. It is there people began to hear only about the Judas, and the Judas are referred as the Jews. That is how the name continued, and it lasted for a long time ago. Even after 70 years of their captivity, they began to return to rebuild the Israel kingdom, while the name Jews has taken dominance. So they were no longer called by their tribe. So it is of recently they have also reunited and become one national Israel. Yet that name, the Jews, continued to be dominant. And most of the people who bear the name Jews and they are taken to captive, some of them finally settled in different parts of the world, and most especially in the Western world, comprising of Europe and America. And they have remnants of them all over Europe, in all nations of Europe. They are here and they are there in America, and that name Jews have become a dominant name. But Jews, which is derived from Judah, is a tribal name. It is just one of the 12 tribes. Then their collective name as a nation is Israel, but as by ancestral origin, they are Hebrew. Then I am here to tell you how Hebrew is their collective ancestral origins and the events surrounding this ancestral origin and the people in quotes. May God bless you for listening. Then I have from SERUG, which is the subtopic, from SERUG to the 12 sons of Jacob. Section 1, I have two sections in which I want to read from the content of this print. I have about 12 pages of them. I will read them so that all the content will be echoed to the public hearing for us to grab the vital information regarding what I have to say. Section 1 is principal direct ancestors of the Hebrews. That is section 1. Under it, I have SERUG, the 68th Bible recorded ancestor from Adam. SERUG, the 68th Bible recorded ancestor from Adam. If you listen to my video, though the video is blocked, according to Facebook record, I made a video on Saturday which I titled, what's the title of the video? Identifying the earliest people on earth. That's the topic of the video. Then look at what Facebook sent to me concerning the video. It said, your video is blocked and can't be viewed in 249 locations. So this is what Facebook has sent to me. This video is blocked from view in 249 locations. I made this video on Saturday titled Identifying the Earliest People on Earth. Look at this. Yes. So your video is being blocked from view in 249 locations. In 249 locations. So, if the video is available to you on Facebook, you can listen to it. I made mention of how human being began to exist on the planet Earth in that video. It is a very long video, but if you are patient to listen to it, it has a lot of information you need. It is almost 3 hours, 30 minutes video. Then, the beginning of the Hebrew, because people began to bear names according to the ancestral tribes and nationality, then SERUG became the chief ancestors of the Hebrew. Then Abraham, the 75th, Abraham, the 75th ancestor from Adam. Third, under section 1. Under section 1, say Abraham, the central figure of the Hebrews. First, SERUG, 68 Bible recorded ancestors from Adam, Genesis 11:22. Abraham, the 75th ancestor from Adam, Genesis 11:29 to 30. Abraham, the central figure of the Hebrews. Genesis 14, verse 8 to 14. 4. The anonymous Hebrews. Anonymous Hebrews. The Hebrews whose names are not mentioned but recorded in the Bible. Then I have two parts of them. Then born by Serug, the 68th ancestor, recorded in Genesis 11, 22 to 23. Born by Nahor, the 70th ancestor, recorded in Genesis 11, 25. Then the section 2 is sequential ancestral history of the Hebrews. Sequential ancestral history of the Hebrew. And it is in this place I'll begin to mention them one by one. And here I have Serug. The second is Nahor. The third is Terah. The fourth is Haran. The fifth is Abram. The sixth is Lot. And you'll be surprised to hear this. The sixth is Lot. The seventh is Isaac. The eighth is Jacob. Then 8 plus 12, after Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel, comprising the 12 sons of Jacob. So they have 20 set of ancestors. 20 set of ancestors from this Serug to the 12 sons of Jacob. Okay, I now start from section 1, which the first one, principal direct ancestors of the Hebrews. That is section 1. 1. Serug, S-E-R-U-G, Serug, as recorded in Genesis chapter 11, verse 22. Serug, the 68th Bible recorded ancestors from Adam. The 68th Bible recorded ancestors from Adam is the chief ancestor of the Hebrews. Genesis 11:22. When Serug had lived 30 years, he became the father of Nahor, N-A-H-O-R. And Serug lived after Nahor, and Serug lived after Nahor was born 200 years and had other sons and daughters. Two, Abraham, the 75th ancestor from Adam. Abraham, the 75th ancestor from Adam. Genesis 11:29 to 30. I'm reading from Amplified. Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. But Sarai was barren, she had no child. Third, Abraham, the central figure of the Hebrews. Genesis 14, verse 8 to 14. Genesis 14, 8 to 14. The king of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela, that is Zoar, went out, and together they joined battle with those kings in the valley of Siddim, with the kings Chedorlaomer of Elam, Tidal of Goyim, and Raphael of Shinar, and Arioch of Elazar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of slain or bitumen pits, and as the king of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, they fell, were overthrown there, and the remainder of the kings fled to the mountain. The victors took all the wealth of Sodom and Gomorrah and all the supply of provisions and departed. And they also took Lot, Abraham's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods away with him. The one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew. What? Verse 13 of Genesis chapter 14. The one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, one from the other side, who was living by the oak or terebinth of Mamre the Amorite, a brother of Eshcol and of Aner. These were allies of Abraham. When Abraham heard that his nephew had been captured, he armed, led forth the 318 trained servants born in his own house, and pursued the enemy as far as Dan. So here Abraham the Hebrew. So as a matter of fact, Abraham is a central figure among the Hebrews. And remember, at this time, Isaac was not yet born, not to talk of Israel, which is Jacob being born. So Abraham is a Hebrew, and Abraham is a grandson of the SERUG. And Abraham is an immediate son of Haran. Abraham is an immediate son of Nahor. While SERUG is the chief ancestor of the Hebrew, and here we see Abraham being the 75th ancestor. The 75th ancestor, 75 minus 8 minus 68 is 7. So Abraham is the 7th ancestor after SERUG. And you see him here described as Abraham the Hebrew. So Abraham had been a Hebrew before he born Isaac. And remember, Abraham is not the Israel. The Israel is his grandson, Jacob. And it is from Jacob we have the 12 sons, which are the fathers, the ancestors of the 12 tribes of Israel. So Abraham had begun to exist as a Hebrew under his ancestral lineage. But here he is a central figure because he is the key figure whom God called out from among the other Hebrews. God called him out and have a great dealing with him, and he becomes the father of faith. And we cannot talk about the history of the Israelites without talking about Abraham. We may not even talk about SERUG and all of the 6 ancestors who previously existed before Abraham. But we will always talk about Abraham because Abraham is a popular figure in the Bible record. And in between their previous ancestors and their preceding ancestors, Abraham stands in the middle. And as a matter of fact, he is actually a central figure. Abraham is actually the central figure of the Hebrews. So I want us to grab the fact that the name Hebrew and the people as Hebrew and the territory they occupy as the Hebrews have been in existence. All we have now is extension. Israel is an extension of the Hebrews. Israel is not only the Hebrews. And these people are not Israelites. Abraham is not an Israelite. Rather, it can be said that the Israelites are Abrahamic. But Abraham is not an Israelite. He just gave birth to someone who gave birth to the father of the Israelites. He just gave birth to someone who gave birth to Israel. And the sons of the Israel, the descendants of Israel, are now the Israelites. Israelites mean descendants of the Israel. As a people, as a whatever, because the name they bear Israel is their father's name. Four, the anonymous Hebrews, which are in two categories among the said ancestors. The first people born by SERUG, the 68th ancestor, Genesis 11, 22 to 23. Let's go back to Genesis 11, 22 to 23. 22 to 23. See. When SERUG had lived 30 years, he became the father of Nahor. And SERUG lived after Nahor was born 200 years and had other sons and daughters. And Nahor had other sons and daughters. So what the fact I want us to grab there is those sons and daughters. Numerous male and female children that SERUG had after he had given birth to Nahor. And these succeeding daughters and sons of SERUG, their names do not appear in the Bible. They are anonymous. Their names are not written in the Bible. That is what I mean by being anonymous. So these anonymous children of SERUG are Hebrews, because SERUG is a Hebrew. SERUG is a Hebrew, and all of the SERUG children are Hebrews. And these anonymous children of Israel can be traced to any location of the earth. At this time, they may be bearing any name of their choice, but their biological origin, they are Hebrews because they are great descendants, great generational descendants of SERUG. Though their names are not mentioned in the Bible, they will be occupying any part of the earth at this point in time, but they are actually the Hebrews, even though they do not bear the name Hebrew at this point in time. They are part and parcel of the Hebrew, and there is no definite number of how many they were. But all we know is that he had other sons and daughters who continue to migrate and continue to get married and giving birth to other people. And all of the people they have given birth to until today are still part of this Hebrew family started from SERUG. Then B, born by Nahor, the 70th ancestor. Nahor, the 70th ancestor, born by Nahor. Verse 25 of this Genesis chapter 11. And Nahor lived after Terah was born. So Nahor born Terah, and after Terah was born, Nahor lived 119 years and had, okay, let me read it from verse 24 and 25. Genesis chapter 11, 24 and 25. When Nahor had lived 29 years, he became the father of Terah. And Nahor lived after Terah was born 119 years and had other sons and daughters. So the same is the case with Reuel. So I don't need to explain it much more. So the anonymous sons and daughters of Nahor, they were also part and parcel of the Hebrew, and all of their succeeding generations until today are part and parcel of the Hebrews, irrespective of which tribal or ancestral, which tribal or whatever nomenclature that have been given to them or they have chosen to bear outside of the name Hebrew. Biologically, they are part of the Hebrew, by biological ancestry. They are part of the Hebrews. Section 2, sequential ancestral history of the Hebrews. Then let us once again begin from their first ancestors, which is SERUG. SERUG means branch. SERUG means branch. The father of Nahor, according to Genesis 11, verse 20 to 23, where I have read earlier, then I will repeat. When Reuel SERUG, Genesis 11. Yeah, 2023 say, when Reuel, the father of SERUG, when Reuel had lived 32 years, he became the father of SERUG. Then, and Reuel lived after SERUG was born 207 years and had other sons and daughters, which are anonymous Hebrews as well. When SERUG had lived 30 years, he became the father of Nahor, and SERUG lived after Nahor was born 200 years and had other sons and daughters, and Nahor lived after Terah was born. Okay, just 22 and 23. Okay. Then he is the person known as SERUG in Luke chapter 3, verse 35. The person called SERUG, SERUG, S-A-R-U, C-H, SERUG, in Hebrew, chapter 3, verse 35. Then the second ancestor and their history is Nahor. Nahor. So this history is compiled and presented in Easton's Bible Dictionary, from where I've been getting information to make some videos. So it is biblical record being affirmed with archaeological evidences by archaeologists who are professors and become part and parcel of the theological institutes. And it is a collective writer coming together to bring this information, to compile it before presenting it to the world with facts and figure. So it is authenticated from the Bible. All of the brief history they write here are being authenticated from the Bible. So the Bible is the word of God, a record from God's word, while the archaeological research is evidential record from human society. Nahor is the second person. Then means snorting, S-N-O-R-T-I-N-G, snorting. The father of Terah, who was the father of Abraham. He was the father of Terah, and Terah was the father of Abraham. According to Genesis 11, 22 to 25, where I have been reading. Then let me read Nahor. Let me read 24 and 25. When Nahor had lived 29 years. Okay, let me read it from that 22, 25 and to 25 through 25. When Serug had lived 30 years, he became the father of Nahor. And Serug lived after Nahor was born 200 years and had other sons and daughters. When Nahor had lived 29 years, he became the father of Terah. And Nahor lived after Terah was born 119 years and had other sons and daughters. Then say, the father of Terah, who was the father of Abraham, Genesis 11, 22, 25, where I have read, Luke chapter 3, verse 34. A son of Terah, now a son of Terah, an elder brother of Abraham, in Genesis 11, 26 and 27. 26 and 27 say, and after Terah had lived 70 years, he became the father of, at different times, Abraham and Nahor and Haran, his firstborn. Now, this is the history of the descendants of Terah. Terah was the father of Abraham, Nahor, and Haran was the father of Lot. Then also record Joshua 24 verse 2. Say, I'm talking about Terah. Terah, he married Milcah, the daughter of his brother Haran. As I've said in the previous video that I made, the earliest people, identifying the earliest people on earth, that some of them married their nephews, while some married their direct sisters in the beginning, until God began to pass law concerning marriage and sex. I'm talking about Terah. He married, let me start afresh. Say, a son of Terah, I'm talking about Nahor, a son of Terah, an elder brother of Abraham. According to Genesis 11, 26 to 27, Joshua 24 verse 2, he married Milcah, the daughter of his brother Haran, and remained in the land of his nativity on the east of the river Euphrates at Haran. Genesis 11, verse 27 to 32. A correspondence was maintained between the father of Abraham in Canaan and the relatives in the old ancestral home at Haran. So Haran is one of the ancestral homes of the Hebrews. Till the time of Jacob, when Jacob fled from Haran, all intercourse between the two branches of the family came to an end, as recorded in Genesis 31, verse 55. His granddaughter Rebekah became Isaac's wife. Genesis 24, the entirety of Genesis 24. But the key verse there, the focal verse there is verse 67, which is the last verse. Terah, meaning the wanderer. Loiterer, Loiterer. For some unknown reason, he migrated with his family from his native mountains in the north to the plain of Mesopotamia. He had 3 sons, Haran, Nahor, and Abraham, and 1 daughter, Sarah. He settled in Ur. He settled in Ur, and of the Chaldees, where his sons Haran died, leaving behind him his son Lot. Nahor settled at Haran, a place on the way to Ur. Terah afterward migrated with Abraham, probably his youngest son, and Lot, his grandson, together with their families from Ur, intending to go with them to Canaan, but he tarried at Haran, where he spent the remainder of his days, and died at the age of 205 years, as recorded in Genesis 11, 24 to verse 32, Joshua 24, verse 2. What a wonderful part the descendants of these Chaldean shepherds have played in the history of the world. Fourth, Haran. Haran means mountaineer means mountaineer. Mountainer, mountaineer. The eldest son of Terah, brother of Abraham and Nahor, and father of Lot, Milcah and Iscah, he died before his father, as recorded in Genesis 11, verse 27, in Ur of the Chaldees. He died before his father in Ur of the Chaldees. Say Hebrew. Then Haran passed, or probably from the Akkadian Charana, meaning a road, a celebrated city of Western Asia, now Haran, where Abraham remained after he left Ur of the Chaldees till his father Terah died, as recorded in Genesis 11, verse 31 to verse 32. When he continued his journey into the land of Canaan, it is called Charan in the XX, which is 70. And in Acts chapter 7, verse 2, it is called the city of Now, according to Genesis 24, verse 10. And Jacob resided there with Laban, Genesis 30, verse 43. It stood on the river Belik, Belik, an affluent of the Euphrates, about 70 miles above where it joins that river in Upper Mesopotamia or Paddan Aram, and about 600 miles northwest of Ur in a direct line. It was on the caravan route between the east and west. It is afterwards mentioned among the towns taken by the king of Assyria, as recorded in 2 Kings 19, verse 12, Isaiah 37, verse 12. It was known to the Greek and Romans under the name Carai, Carrhae, the sons of Caleb of Judah, as recorded in 1 Chronicle chapter 2, verse 46, by his concubine Ephah. The fifth one, Abraham, who has the longest story among the contents of this reading. Abraham, the fifth one, father of multitude. That's the meaning of Abraham. Father of multitude, son of Terah. According to Genesis 11, verse 22, named before his older brothers Nahor and Haran, because he was the heir of the promise. Till the age of 70, Abraham sojourned among his kindred in his native country of Chaldee. He then, with his father and his family and household, quitted the city of Ur, in which he had hitherto dwelt, and went some 300 miles north to Haran, where he abode 15 years. The cause of his migration was a call from God, as recorded in the book of Acts, chapter 7, verse 2 to 4. There is no mention of this first call in the Old Testament. It is implied, however, in Genesis chapter 12. While they tarried at Haran, Terah died at the age of 205 years. Abraham now received a second and more definite call, accompanied by a promise from God. Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. Whereupon he took his departure, taking his nephew Lot with him, not knowing whither he went. Hebrew 11, chapter 8. He trusted implicitly. He trusted implicitly to the guidance of him who had called him. Abraham, now with a large household of probably 1,000 souls, entered on a migratory life and dwelt in the tent, passing along the valley of the Jabbok in the land of Canaan. He formed his first encampment at Shechem, Sichel. Genesis 12, verse 6. In the vale of oak grove of Moreh, between Ebal on the north and Gerizim on the south. Here he received the great promise, I will make of thee a great nation. That is an example of the great promises as recorded in Genesis chapter 12, verse 2, verse 3, and verse 7. This promise comprehended not only temporal, but also spiritual blessings. It implied that he was the chosen ancestor of the great deliverer whose coming had been long ago predicted. Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. Soon after this, for some reasons not mentioned, he removed his tent to the mountain district between Bethel, then called Luz, and Ai, towns about 2 miles apart, where he built an altar to Jehovah. He again moved into the southern tract of Palestine, called by the Hebrews the Negev. Called by the Hebrews the Negev. So these Hebrews have been in existence, as I've said. The Hebrew call it the Negev. Then let me read this paragraph. I'm talking about Abraham. Soon after this, for some reasons not mentioned, he removed his tent to the mountain district between Bethel, then called Luz, and Ai, town between 2 miles apart, where he built an altar to Jehovah. He again moved into the southern tract of Palestine, called by the Hebrews the Negev, and was at length, on account of a famine, compelled to go down into Egypt. This took place in the time of the Hyksos, 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 a Semitic race, which now held an Egyptian in bondage. Here occurred that case of deception on the part of Abraham, which exposed him to the rebuke of Pharaoh. Genesis chapter 12, verse 18. Sarai was restored to him, and Pharaoh loaded him with presents, recommending him to withdraw from the country. He returned to Canaan richer than when he left it, in cattle, in silver, and in gold. Genesis 12, verse 18. Genesis 13, verse 2. Comparing it to Psalm 105, verse 13 to 14. The whole party then moved northward and returned to their previous station near Bethel. Here dispute arose between Lot's shepherd and those of Abraham about water and pasturage. Abraham generously gave Lot his choice of the pasture ground. Comparing 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 7. He chose the well-watered plain in which Sodom was situated and removed thither. And thus the uncle and nephew were separated. Immediately after this, Abraham was cheered by a repetition of promises already made to him. And when removed to the plain of Oak Grove of Mamre, which is in Hebrew, he finally settled here, pitching his tent under a famous oak or terebinth tree, called the Oak of Mamre, according to Genesis chapter 13, verse 18. This was his third resting place in the land. Some 14 years before this, while Abraham was still in charge, the Palestine had been, some 14 years before this, while Abraham was still in Jordan, Palestine had been invaded by Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, who brought under tribute to him the 5 cities in the plain to which Lot had removed. This tribute was felt by the inhabitants of these cities to be a heavy burden, and after 12 years they revolted. This brought upon them the vengeance of Chedorlaomer, who had in league with him 4 other kings. He ravaged the whole country, plundering the towns and carrying the inhabitants away as slaves. Among those thus treated was Lot. Hearing of the disaster that had fallen on his nephew Abraham, immediately gathered from his own household a band of 318 armed men, and being joined by the Amoritish chiefs Memre and Ner, Eshcol, he pursued after Chedorlaomer and overtook him near the springs of the Jordan. They attacked and routed his army and pursued it over the range of Anti-Libanus as far as to Hobah near Damascus, and then returned, bringing back all the spoils that had been carried away, returning by way of Salem, which is Jerusalem. The king of that place, Melchizedek, came forth to meet them with refreshment. To him, Abraham presented a tenth of the spoils in recognition of his character as a priest of the Most High God, as recorded in Genesis 14, verse 18 to verse 20. I keep on reading. Abraham has a very long story regarding this. In a recently discovered tablet dated in the reign of the grandfather of Amraphel, Genesis 14 verse 1, one of the witnesses is called the Amorite, the son of Abiramu or Abram. Having returned to his home at Mamre, the promises already made to him by God were repeated and enlarged, as recorded in Genesis chapter 13 verse 14. The word of the Lord, an expression occurring here for the first time, came to him as recorded in Genesis chapter 15 verse 1. He now understood better the future that lay before the nation that was to spring from him. Sarai, now 75 years old, in her impatience, persuaded Abraham to take Hagar, her Egyptian maid, as a concubine, intending that whatever child might be born should be reckoned as her own. Ishmael was accordingly thus brought up and was regarded as the head of these promises, as recorded in Genesis chapter 16. When Ishmael was 13 years old, God again revealed yet more explicitly and fully his gracious purpose, and in token of the sure fulfillment of that purpose, the patriarch's name was now changed from Abram to Abraham, as recorded in Genesis chapter 17 verse 4 and verse 5. And the rite of circumcision was instituted as a sign of the covenant. It was then announced that the heir to these covenant promises would be the son of Sarah, though she was now 90 years old, and it was directed that his name should be Isaac. At the same time, in commemoration of the promises, Sarai's name was changed to Sarah. On the memorable day of God's thoughts revealing his design, Abraham and his son Ishmael and all the males of his house were circumcised, as recorded in Genesis chapter 17. 3 months after this, as Abraham sat in his tent door, he saw 3 men approaching. They accepted his proffered hospitality and seated under an oak tree, partook of the fare which Abraham and Sarah provided. Fare, F-A-R-E. One of the 3 visitants was none other than the Lord, and the other two were angels in the guise of men. The Lord renewed on his occasion, renewed on this occasion his promise of a son by Sarah, who was rebuked for her unbelief. Abraham accompanied the three as they proceeded on their journey. The two angels went on towards Sodom, while the Lord tarried behind and talked with Abraham, making known to him the destruction that was about to fall on that guilty city. The patriarch interceded earnestly in behalf of the doomed city, but as not even 10 righteous persons were found in it, for whose sake the city would have been spared, the threatened destruction fell upon it, and early next morning Abraham saw the smoke of the fire that consumed it as the smoke of a furnace. Genesis 19, verse 1 to 28. After 15 years residence at Mamre, Abraham moved southward and pitched his tent among the Philistines near to Gerar. Here occurred that sad instance of prevarication on his part in his relation to Abimelech the king. Genesis chapter 20. Soon after this event, the patriarch left the vicinity of Gerar and moved down the fertile valley about 25 miles to Beersheba. It was probably here that Isaac was born. Abraham being now 100 years old, a feeling of jealousy now arose between Sarah and Hagar, whose son Ishmael was no longer to be regarded as Abraham's heir. Sarah insisted that both Hagar and her son should be sent away. This was done, although it was a hard trial to Abraham, as recorded in Genesis 21, verse 12. Then, in that Bible dictionary, when you insert Hagar and Ishmael, you have enlarged stories about them. At this point, there is a blank in the patriarch's history of perhaps 25 years. These years of peace and happiness were spent at Beersheba. The next time we see him, his faith is put to a severe test by the command that suddenly came to him to go offer up Isaac. I repeat, at this point there is a blank in the patriarch's history of perhaps 25 years. These years of peace and happiness were spent at Beersheba. The next time we see him, his faith is put to a severe test by the command that suddenly came to him to go and offer Isaac, the heir of all the promises, as a sacrifice on one of the mountains of Moriah. His faith stood the test. Hebrew 11, chapter 17 to 19. He proceeded in a spirit of unhesitating obedience to carry out the command, and when about to slay his son, whom he had laid on the altar, his uplifted hand was arrested by the angel of Jehovah, and a ram which was entangled in a thicket near at hand was seized and offered in his stead. From this circumstance, that place was called Jehovah Jireh, or Jehovah Jireh, Jireh. the Lord will provide. That's the meaning. The promises made to Abraham were confirmed, and this was the last recorded word of God to the patriarch. And he descended to Mount with his son and returned to his home at Beersheba, Genesis 22, verse 19, where he resided for some years and then moved northward to Hebron. Some years after this, Sarah died at Hebron, being 127 years old. Abraham acquired now the needful possessions of a buying place, the cave of Machpelah, Machpelah, by purchase from the owner of it, Ephron the Hittite. Genesis 23. And there he buried Sarai. His next care was to provide a wife for Isaac, and for this purpose he sent his steward Eliezer to Haran or Charan, as recorded in Acts chapter 7 verse 2, where his brother Nahor and his family resided, as recorded in Genesis chapter 11 verse 31. The result was that Rebekah, the daughter of Nahor, son of Bethuel, became the wife of Isaac. Genesis chapter 24. Abraham then himself took to wife Keturah, who became the mother of 6 sons, whose descendants were afterward known as the children of the East, recorded in Judges chapter 6 verse 3, and later as the Saracens. At length, all his wandering came to an end. Saracens, S-A-R-O-C-E-N-S. At length, all his wandering came to an end. At the age of 175 years, 100 years after he had 100 years after he had first entered the land of Canaan, he died and was buried in the old family burying place at Machpelah, Genesis 25, verse 7 to verse 10. The history of Abraham made a wide and deep impression on the ancient world, and references to it are interwoven in the religious traditions of almost all Eastern nations. He is called the friend of God, according to James chapter 2, verse 23. He is called faithful Abraham, according to Galatians chapter 3, verse 9. He is called the father of us, the father of us all, the father of us all, according to Romans chapter 4, verse 16. So from the history of Abraham, we see the appearance of Ishmael. We see the appearance of the second wife Abraham married, whose name was Keturah, and Keturah bore Abraham 6 children, 6 sons. And remember, forget about the daughters. Ishmael is a part of Hebrew. Ishmael is a part of Hebrew, irrespective of the name he bear when him and his mother was thrown out from Abraham's family. He is being born by Abraham. Biologically, Ishmael is a Hebrew, and Ishmael is an illegitimate son of Abraham. He is a Hebrew, and his descendants until this day are all Hebrews. This is a fact we must accept if we are to be realistic. So the descendants of Israel are Hebrew. All of the children whose names are not mentioned, born to Abraham by Keturah, all of them are Hebrews because their father is Abraham the Hebrew. So we see the extension of the Hebrew. We see the extension of the Hebrew. Now Isaac had been born, and at this time Jacob was not yet born. Sarah had died. Abraham had died. It remains Isaac, which is the promised son, while Ishmael on his way, getting married and giving birth to children, while Keturah had born six other children. Let me, I would have made some marking so that as soon as I want to, I just pick. So, Keturah born him his own children. Okay, six sons. Born him six sons. Keturah born Abraham six sons. So as the family lineage is being counted through the sons and not through the daughters, so the six sons of Keturah were the Hebrews. They were part and parcel of the Hebrew. They are Abrahamic. They are Abrahamic, and they continue to grow, getting married and having children and grandchildren, and now they are located anywhere of their choice, anywhere they have migrated and settled on this planet Earth. Therefore, they are the Hebrews. They are part and parcel of the Hebrew. The Hebrew is a language. It is a race. Hebrew is a race. It is beyond a nation. It is a race. It is an ethnic group and a race located in different parts of the world, identified as Hebrew and identified with other ethnic or tribal nomenclatures, but biologically they are all Hebrews because they are Abrahamic. The sixth is Lot. So Lot is not exempt. Lot, Abraham's nephew, is a Hebrew, not given birth by Abraham, but given birth by Abraham's brother. All the Abraham brothers are Hebrews. All the Abraham brothers are Hebrew. Abraham's father is a Hebrew. Abraham's grandfather, they are all Hebrew, but Abraham is the central figure of the Hebrew. And Lot is Abraham's nephew, born by his brother. He is a Hebrew. And all of the descendants of Lot until today, starting from then until today, they are all Hebrews. They are people from the same lineage, irrespective of their locations at today and their ethnic or tribal or national nomenclatures. Lot, Hebrew. Goral, a pebble, P-E-B-B-L-E, a pebble. A small stone used in casting lot. Okay, this is a symbolic meaning of lot. Then let me go to the person of Lot. Lot, Hebrew means Lot. A covering, veil, means a covering or veil. The son of Haran and nephew of Abraham, recorded in Genesis chapter 11, verse 27. On the death of his father, he was left in charge of his grandfather Terah. Genesis 11, verse 31. After whose death he accompanied his uncle Abraham into Canaan. Genesis chapter 12, verse 5. Hence into Egypt. Genesis chapter 12, verse 10. And back again to Canaan. Genesis 13, verse 1. After this, he separated from him and settled in Sodom. Genesis chapter 13, verse 5 to verse 13. There his righteous soul was vexed from day to day, as recorded in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 7. And he had great cause to regret his act. Not many years after the separation, he was taken captive by Chedorlaomer and was rescued by Abraham, Genesis chapter 14. At length, when the judgment of God descended on the guilty city of the plain, Genesis chapter 19, verse 1 to 20, Lot was miraculously delivered. When fleeing from the doomed city, his wife looked back from behind him and became a pillar of salt. There is to this day a peculiar crag at the south end of the Dead Sea, near Qumran, which the Arabs called Bint Sheikh Lot. Lot's wife, Sheikh Lot, meaning Lot's wife. It is a tall, isolated needle of rock, which really does bear a curious resemblance to an Arab woman with a child upon her shoulder. From the words of warning in Luke chapter 17, verse 32, remember Lot's wife. It will seem as if she had gone back or tarried so long behind in the desire to save some of her goods that she became involved in the destruction which fell on the city and became a stiffened corpse, fixed for a time in the saline incrustations. She became a pillar of salt, as some think of asphalt, ASPHALT, asphalt. Lot and his daughter sought refuge first in Zoar, and then, fearing to remain there longer, retired to a cave in the neighboring mountain. As recorded in Genesis 19, verse 30, Lot has recently been connected with the people called on the Egyptian monument Rotanu or Lotanu, who is supposed to have been the hero of the Edomite tribe Lotan. The seventh is Isaac. It is now Isaac after Lot. If you begin to count them according to their biblical ancestors, the Hebrews, not talking about those who have no direct link to Israel. Then we talk about direct linkage to Israel. You talk about from Terah, who was the father of Abraham now and Haran. Then you talk about Abraham. From Abraham, then you talk about Isaac. Isaac is the man who born Israel directly. All other people are their relatives. They are their siblings, and all of their siblings are also Hebrews. So there is possibility of people being Hebrews and not being Israelis. There is the possibility of the Israelis and all of the Hebrews all over the world having relations in their common languages and dialects. There is the possibility, and most of them may not know it, but this biblical fact reveals it and brings it to comprehension of whosoever cares to know. It is now about Isaac. Isaac means laughter. Israel, or the kingdom of the 10 tribes. Amos, chapter 7, verse 9, verse 9 and verse 16. The only son of Abraham by Sarah, he was the longest lived of the 3 patriarchs, as recorded in Genesis 21, verse 1 to 3. He was circumcised when 8 days old. Genesis chapter 21, verse 4 to 7. And when he was probably 2 years old, a great feast was held in connection with his being weaned. The next memorable event in his life is that connected with the command of God given to Abraham to offer him up as a sacrifice on a mountain in the land of Moriah. Genesis chapter 22. When he was 40 years of age, Rebekah was chosen for his wife. Genesis 24. After the death and burial of his father, he took up his residence at Beer-lahai-roi. Genesis 25, verse 7 to 11. Where his 2 sons, Esau and Jacob, were born. Genesis 25, verse 21 to verse 26. The former of whom seemed to have been his favorite, the former of who, that is Jacob, seemed to be his favorite, recorded in Genesis 25, verse 27 to verse 28. In consequences of a famine, Genesis 26, verse 1, Isaac went to Gerar, where he practiced deception as to his relation to Rebekah, imitating the conduct of his father in Egypt, as recorded in Genesis chapter 12, verse 12 to 20, and in Gerar, Genesis chapter 20, verse 2, the Philistine king rebuked him for his prevarication. After sojourning for some time in the land of the Philistine, he returned to Beersheba, where God gave him fresh assurance of covenant blessing, and where Abimelech entered into a covenant of peace with him. The next chief event in his life was the blessings of his sons. Genesis 27, verse 1. He died at Mamre, being old and full of days. Genesis 35, verse 27 to 29, 180 years old, and was buried in the cave of Machpelah, M-A-C-H-P-E-L-A-H. In the New Testament, reference is made to his having been offered up by his father. Hebrew 11, verse 17, James chapter 2, verse 21, and to his blessing his sons. Hebrew 11, verse 20, as the child of promise, he is contrasted with Ishmael. Romans chapter 9, verse 7 and verse 10, Galatians chapter 4, verse 28, Hebrew chapter 11, verse 18. Isaac is at once a counterpart of his father in simple devoutness and purity of life, and a contrast in his passive weakness of character, which in part at least may have sprung from his relations to his mother and wife. After the expulsion of Ishmael and Hagar, Isaac had no competitor and grew up in the shade of Sarah's tent, mounted into feminine softness by habitual submission to her strong, loving to her. Sorry, let me read afresh. Isaac is at once a counterpart of his father in simple devoutness and purity of life, and a contrast in his passive weakness of character, in which in part at least may have sprung from his relation to his mother and wife. After the expulsion of Ishmael and Hagar, Isaac had no competitor and grew up in the shade of Sarah's tent, molded into feminine softness by habitual submission to her strong, loving will. His life was so quiet and uneventful that it was spent within the circle of a few miles, so guileless that he let Jacob overreach him rather than disbelieve his assurance, so tender that his mother's death was the poignant sorrow of years, so patient and gentle that peace with his neighbors was dearer than even such a coveted possession as a well of living waters dug by his own men, so grandly obedient that he put his life at his father's disposal, so firm in his reliance on God that his greatest concern through life was to honor the divine promise given to his race. The eighth ancestor, Jacob, one who follows on another's heel, supplanter, as the meaning. Genesis 25, verse 26, Genesis 27, verse 36, Hosea chapter 12, verse 2 to 4. The second born of the twin sons of Isaac by Rebekah. He was born probably at Lahairoi when his father was 59. When his father was 59 and Abraham 159 years old. Like his father, he was of a quiet and gentle disposition, and when he grew up, followed the life of a shepherd, while his brother Esau became an enterprising hunter. His dealing with Esau, however, showed much mean selfishness and cunning, as recorded in Genesis 25, verse 29 to verse 34. When Isaac was about 160 years of age, Jacob and his mother conspired to deceive the aged patriarch, Genesis 27, with the view of pouring the transfer of the birthright to himself. The birthright secured to him who possessed it one superior rank in his family. And read, when Isaac was about 160 years of age, Jacob and his mother conspired to deceive the aged patriarch, as recorded in Genesis 27, with the view of procuring the transfer of the birthright to himself. The birthright secured to him who possessed it first superior rank in his family, as recorded in Genesis 49 verse 3. Second, a double portion of the paternal inheritance, as recorded in Deuteronomy 21 verse 17. Third, the priestly office in the family, as recorded in Numbers chapter 8 verse 17 to 19. And four, the promise of the seed in which all nations of the earth were to be blessed, as recorded in Genesis 22, verse 18. Soon after this acquisition of his father's blessing, as recorded in Genesis chapter 27, Jacob became conscious of his guilt and afraid of the anger of Esau. At the suggestion of Rebekah, Isaac sent him away to Haran, 400 miles or more, to find a wife among his cousins. The family of Laban the Syrian, as recorded in Genesis chapter 28, it's recorded in verse, in Genesis chapter 28, yes. There he met with Rachel, Genesis 29. Laban would not consent to give him his daughter in marriage till he had served 7 years. But to Jacob, this year seemed to be a few days, for the love he had to her. But when the 7 years were expired, Laban craftily deceived Jacob and gave him his daughter Leah. Other 7 years of service had to be completed probably before he obtained the beloved Rachel. But lifelong sorrow, disgrace, and trials in the retributive providence of God followed as a consequence of his double union. At the close of the 14 years of service, Jacob desired to return to his parents, but at the entreaty of Laban, he tarried yet 6 years waiting, tending his flock. Genesis 31, verse 41. He then set out with his family and property to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. Genesis 31. Laban was angry when he heard that Jacob had set out on his journey and pursued after him, overtaking him in 7 days. The meeting was of a painful kind. After much recrimination and reproach directed against Jacob, Laban is at length pacified and taking an affectionate farewell of his daughters, returns to his home in Padanaram, and now all connections of the Israelites with Mesopotamia is at an end. Soon after parting with Laban, he is met by a company of angels, as if to greet him on his return, welcome him back to the land of promise. Genesis 32, verse 1 and verse 2. He called the name of the place Mahanaim, M-A-H-A-N-N-A-I-M, Mahanaim. The double camp, probably his own camp and that of the angel. The vision of angels was the counterpart of that he had formerly seen at Bethel when 20 years before the weary solitary traveler on his way to Panadran saw the angels of God ascending and descending on the ladder whose top reached to heaven, as recorded in Genesis 28, verse 12. He now hears with dismay of the approach of his brother Esau with a band of 400 men to meet him. In great agony of mind, he prepared for the worst. He feels that he must now depend only on God, and he betrays himself to him in earnest prayer and sends on before him a munificent present to Esau. A present to my Lord Esau from thy servant Jacob. Jacob's family were then transported across the Jabbok, but he himself remained behind, spending the night in communion with God while us engaged. There appeared one in the form of a man who wrestled with him. In this mysterious contest, Jacob prevailed, and as a memorial of it, his name was changed to Israel, wrestler with God, and a prince with God. And the place where this occurred, he called Peniel, for said he, I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved, as recorded in Genesis chapter 32, verse 25 to verse 31. After this anxious night, Jacob went on his way, halting, mysteriously weakened by the conflict, but strong in the assurance of the divine favor. Esau came forth and met him, but his spirit of revenge was appeased, and the brothers met as friends. And during the remainder of their life, they maintained friendly relations. After a brief sojourn at Sukkot, Jacob moved forward and pitched his tent near Shechem. Genesis chapter 33, verse 18. But at length, under divine direction, he moved to Bethel, where he made an altar unto God. Genesis 35, verse 6 to 7. And where God appeared to him and renewed the Abrahamic covenant, while journeying from Bethel to Ephrat, the Canaanitish name of Bethlehem, Ephrat, E-P-H-R-O-A-T-H, Ephrat, the Canaanitish name of Bethlehem. Rachel died in giving birth to her second son, Benjamin, as recorded in Genesis chapter 5, verse 16 to 20. 15 or 16 years after the birth of Jacob is when Rachel died. He then reached the old family residence at Mamre to wait on the dying bed of his father Isaac. The complete reconciliation between Esau and Jacob was shown by their uniting in the burial of the patriarch, which is their father Jacob, as recorded in Genesis their father Isaac, as recorded in Genesis chapter 35, verse 27 to verse 29. Jacob was soon after this deeply grieved by the loss of his beloved son Joseph through the jealousy of his brothers. Genesis 37, verse 33. Then follows the story of famine and the successive going down into Egypt to buy corn. Genesis chapter 42, which led to the discovery of the long lost Joseph, and the patriarchs going down with all his household, numbering about 70 souls, as recorded in Exodus chapter 1, verse 5, Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 20, to Acts chapter 7, verse 14, to sojourn in the land of Goshen. Here Jacob, after being strangely tossed about on a very rough ocean, found at last a tranquil harbor where all the best affections of his nature were gently exercised and largely unfolded. Genesis 48. At length, the end of his Shekard calls draw 9, N-I-G-H. And he summoned his sons to his bedside that he may bless them. Among his last words, he repeats the story of Rachel's death. Although 40 years have passed away since that event took place, as tenderly as if it had happened only yesterday. And when he had made an end of changing his sons, and when he had made an end of charging his sons, he gathered up his feet into his bed and yielded up the ghost. Genesis 49, verse 33. His body was embalmed and carried with great pomp into the land of Canaan and buried beside his wife Leah in the cave of Machpelah, according to his dying charge. There probably his embalmed body remained to this day, as recorded in Genesis chapter 50, verse 1 to 13. The history of Jacob is referred to be the prophet. The history of Jacob is referred to by the prophet Hosea, according to Hosea chapter 12, verse 3 to verse 4 and verse 12, and Malachi chapter 1, verse 2. And Malachi, according to Malachi chapter 1, verse 2. In Malachi chapter 1, verse 5, the name is a poetic synonym for Israel. The kingdom of the 10 tribes, they are right beside the mention of his name, along with those of the other patriarchs, distinct references to events of his life in Paul's epistle, according to Romans chapter 9, verse 11 to 13, Hebrew chapter 12, verse 16, Hebrew chapter 11, verse 21. See references to his visions at Bethel and his possession of land at Shechem in John chapter 1, verse 51, John chapter 4, verse 5 and verse 12. Also the famine which was occasion of his going down into Egypt in Acts chapter 7, verse 12. And more research concerning this. So the eighth ancestor is now over according to the history. Now we come to the remaining 12. The remaining 12 will be narrated collectively. The remaining 12 of the Hebrew ancestors will be narrated collectively. So Israel, the chief ancestors of the Israel, which is Jacob, is a Hebrew. Then all of his descendants are Hebrew. So that means all Israelis are Hebrew. And all of the descendants of the Hebrew from SERUG, even before Jacob was born, they were all Hebrews. And the children they gave birth are all Hebrew, irrespective of where they locate today. Ishmael is also a Hebrew, and the descendants of Ishmael are all Hebrew. But whatever may, people have their various locations, and people occupy their various locations as it is today and take care of the locations in which they occupy. That is how it is done today. But tracing who are the Hebrews and the history of the Hebrews, you touch these aspects of life in different locations. And today, without the names Hebrew, but according to their choice of nomenclature, politically, religiously, or otherwise, traditionally or otherwise. Now I want to round up with the 12. These are the 12 tribes of Israel, charts, the 12 sons of Jacob and patriarch of the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, namely, we have I said, the 12 tribes of Israel descended from the patriarch Jacob, son of Isaac, and grandson of Abraham, who was renamed Israel and gave his name to the nation. Jacob's 12 sons in order of birth are Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. And these became the patriarchs of the 12 tribes of Israel, with the exception of Joseph, whose two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, who were adopted by Jacob, became the patriarch of 2 tribes, according to Genesis chapter 48. The mothers of Jacob's 12 sons, according to Genesis chapter 35, verse 22 to verse 26, they are: Leah is the mother of Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Rachel is the mother of Joseph and Benjamin. Then Zilpah, Leah's maid, the mother of Gad and Asher. Bilhah, Rachel's maid, the mother of Dan and Naphtali. All these people are Hebrews. They are all Hebrews, all of their descendants, no matter where they locate at this point in time, and at any angle of the globe, they are all Hebrews. Then I want us to watch these charts. Just look at this chart. The names on the blue are the names containing their husbands, while the names on the red are the names of their wives. 12 tribes of Israel, according to their parents, their husbands, and their wives. So later on, I will also read them separately according to the mark and the arrows pointed at each one. Watch it also from YouTube. So 12 tribes of Israel. Here we see Abraham, whose wife is Sarah. Abraham to Sarah, Sarah to the both of them to Isaac, Isaac to Rebekah, the both of them to Jacob. And from here we have 4 branches. From Jacob we have Leah, we have Rachel as the major wife. Then the other wives, Bilhah, which is Rachel's maid. Then we have Zilpah, which is Leah's maid. Then under Bilhah, under Rachel, we have Joseph and Benjamin. Under Leah, the elder sister, Rachel is the younger sister, who were both wives of Jacob. Under Leah, the elder sister, we have Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. Then we have Issachar, we have Zebulun. Then we have Dinah. That is the only female whose name appears after the 12. Then under Rachel, as I said earlier, we have Joseph, we have Benjamin. Then under Rachel's servant, which is Bilhah, we have Dan and Naphtali. Under Zilpah, which is Leah's servant, we have Gad and Asher. We have Gad and Asher. So if anyone traces his biological ancestor or ancestral biology to any of the 12 sons, either Gad or any of them, the person or the people, they are actually descendants of the Israelis, and they are actually the Hebrew. Even if they are not directly migrants from Israel, from these 12 tribes, but they are migrants either from Lot or from the previous ancestors who existed from SERUG to Abraham to Isaac and to Jacob. They are superior Hebrew to the Israelis. Israelis are far younger than them, but the difference is that Israel is excellent. They excel in prosperity and in divine favor. They excel more than the rest of the Hebrew. But the former Hebrews, even before the birth of Jacob and before the birth of the last stage of these ancestors, this collective ancestor, which are the 12 sons of Jacob, those who occupy the territory known as the Israel nation today, they are the youngest among the Hebrew lineage, and they are all Hebrew. And by the grace of God, being part of this family is actually being a Hebrew, either a Hebrew before Israel or a Hebrew as an Israelite. So that's the Hebrew, their brief history, and the people who are actually the Hebrews. And from here, we will no longer be so confused to recognize and identifying who are actually the Hebrew. When we are asked, if we take our time to listen and listen and listen and listen again, this documentational record I am here preparing will continue to realize who are the Hebrews, and so that we will no longer continue to limit, to shrink the Hebrews to be few people among the Israelis. No, all of the Israelis are Hebrews, and the Israelis are the youngest generation. They are the youngest descendants. They are the youngest ancestral lineage of the Hebrews. Abraham is a Hebrew, but not an Israel. Lot is a Hebrew, but not an Israel. Ishmael is a Hebrew, not an Israel. All of the anonymous ancestors of Abraham's fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers, they are all Hebrews, but not Israel. And Abraham is described in the Bible as Abraham the Hebrew. Abraham is not an Israelite, but he is a Hebrew. Rather, Israelis are Abrahamic, because Israelis is born from the lineage of Abraham. Abraham is the great-grandfather of the Israelis of today. Abraham gave birth to Isaac. Then Isaac became father of Israel, which is Jacob. Abraham became the grandfather of Israel, who is Jacob. Then the 12 sons of Jacob became great-grandsons of Abraham, while Abraham became great-grandfather of the 12 sons of Jacob, who are the last stage of the Hebrews according to Bible record. But people, their children who are born wherever they locate all over the world, those who call the American Jews, the European Jews, they are all Hebrews. Those with dark skin like myself, who we are being born, whose grandfather we are being born even before the call of Abraham. Most Hebrews are superior Hebrews to Abraham. There are people whose grandfather and those anonymous children of those grandfathers, they are all Hebrews. They are superior Hebrews to Abraham. They are older than Abraham. So it is possible that it is possible that those who are actually Hebrew are older than Abraham in those days, as we see from the Bible record. Then, to end up this program, the Igbos, who are from the descendant of Gad. They are also the Hebrews. They are from descendant of Gad, and Gad is the eighth son among the 12. Then counting them from one, Reuben is the first son, Simeon the second son, Levi the third son, Judah the fourth son, under Leah the first wife. Then we have Bilhah, which is Rachel's servant, who we have Leah, who became the third wife. At this time, Rachel was barren. Then Leah gave birth to two sons, which were Dan and Naphtali, making it the fifth and the sixth. Then the older sister Leah, out of her own jealousy and rivalry, gave also her own maid to their husband Jacob, and Jacob married her also and gave from her the seventh son, which is Gad. Gad is the seventh among the 12. Then the eighth son is Asher. Thereafter, Leah, the first wife and the oldest among the wives, gave birth also to Issachar, which is the ninth son. The 10th son is Zebulun by the same Leah. It is after then that God broke the yoke of barrenness in the life of Rachel. Rachel then born Joseph and Benjamin. So may God bless you for listening. And the program has come to an end. Until you hear from me once again, and very soon, I don't know what the time is at the time. Okay, it is just 3 o'clock. It is just